My beloved science is in a crisis, a reproducibility crisis, a crisis of fraud of epidemic proportions. Let's go take a look. And today we're going to be discussing bad science, and we're going to be talking about this. Masks. Do masks work at preventing COVID? Hey, maybe we got a new answer today. Today we're going to look at just shoddy science or bad science that answers or tries to answer that particular question. And of course, this got picked up and is all over the news right now. So this morning I wake up and I see this. I find that Maggie Fox, hey, look at Maggie down there. In theory, we're in agreement because she says facts matter and truth is not liberal bias. I do health, science, tech in plain English. A lot of followers, so I'm hoping Maggie can get this right. And she quoted out here from this study that's in a preprint. Remember, that doesn't mean it's peer-reviewed, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, as we're going to see later on. She writes here, quoting from the study, the probability of getting COVID-19 for mask wearers was 7%. For non-mask wearers, probability was 52%. 769 people had retweeted that. 1,927 people had liked it. And that was just as of this morning. So what is this study? Well, it's this one. The title is The Efficacy of Face Masks in the Prevention of COVID-19, a Systematic Review. We can see the list of authors on there. They come from Hofstra. They come from a clinical medical library, Feinstein Institute for Medical Research, Donald and Barbara Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra, and something called Healthcare Partners IPA and MSO in Garden City, New York. Okay, so these are the people. What did they find? This abstract, they said, face masks have become a symbol of disease prevention in the context of COVID-19, yet there still exists a paucity of collected scientific evidence surrounding their epidemiological efficacy in the prevention of SARS-CoV-2 transmission. This systematic review sought to analyze the efficacy of face masks, regardless of type, on the prevention of SARS-CoV-2 transmission, hold on to that thought, in both healthcare and community settings. All right, well, I mean, that's a worthy study, I guess. What they're doing here is they're reviewing other literature to see if they can combine that collected understanding to give us some deeper understanding. So what'd they do? Well, let's see. The initial review yielded 1,732 studies they could have looked at, which were reviewed by 3 study team members. 61 full-text studies were found to meet entry criteria, and 13 studies yielded data that was used in the final analysis. We're going to have to see how they winnowed 1,732 studies down to 13. There's cherry picking is really a thing. So I'm going to be very curious which 13 they picked and how did they get there. This is instructive. Trust me, this is going somewhere. This is important. In all, 243 subjects were identified with COVID-19, of whom 97 had been wearing masks and 146 had not. The probability, therefore, of getting COVID-19 for mask wearers was 7%, which is 97 divided by 1,463. And I'm not sure how they got those 4, 6, 7, 1,300. I'm not sure how they got those numbers. It's not clear from this description. For non-mask wearers, the probability was 52%. That was 158 out of 303. So the relative risk of getting COVID-19 for mask wearers was 0.13. Wow, that's huge. 87% reduction in your chance of getting COVID if you wore a mask. Amazing. How did they do this study? At any rate, their conclusion is, based on these studies' results, we determined that across healthcare and community settings, those who wore masks were less likely to contact COVID-19. I think that's supposed to mean contract, but we'll let it go. All right, so what did they do? Here's a flow chart of their systematic review. I love this. First 2 boxes, A, up top there. Let me get my drawing tool out because this is fun. I love this part. First, records identified through database searching, 2,730. Additional records identified through other sources, 0. So that's unnecessary flow boxery right there. That upper right one, not necessary. At any rate, records after duplicates were removed, they had 1,732 papers to look at. That's a big universe. They screened 1,732. They excluded 1,671. We don't know why. Full text articles assessed for eligibility was 61, excluded with reasons. So they just told us reasons. And then finally they had 13 to look at. What an astonishing, whenever you see this in science, you think shoddy right away because your criteria for inclusion and exclusion has to be absolutely rigorous, completely spelled out, completely transparent, because you can do a lot by combing through 1,700 separate records and deciding these are the 13 that are going to tell the tale. You're going to have to be very clear about how you went about that. They were not clear. All they said was the initial review yielded 1,732 studies, which were reviewed. 61 full text studies were found to meet the criteria, and 13 studies were used in the final analysis. That's it. That's all they said. I don't have a lot of clarity. So, in other words, the pool of subjects was 7 times smaller than the number of articles considered and rejected because reasons. Do I have to repeat? It was reasons. That was 1,719 excluded studies, 243 COVID cases. Let's keep going, though. Here are those 13 cherry-picked studies. Let's see what we got here. Okay, first up. Here Chang in South Korea. They said site was a healthcare site. They had 3 people ended up infected out of 303. Okay, that one didn't jump out at me too much. How about this one from 2004? Wait a minute. Didn't they tell us they were interested in looking on the influence of masks on SARS-CoV-2 transmission? You can't pull a study from 2004. That should have been scratched out right there. So that's weird. And then how about this one? Kerhulet here they said 11 subjects on a charter flight, all wearing masks with 1 positive case. But over here we see a number 20 and a 0. So I thought, is it 1, 0? Is it 20? Is it 11? But the conclusion was low risk for transmission when wearing masks. So I like, that's kind of curious. Let's go to that study. So here I find it. This is the Caruhel study right here. Actually, it's not a study. Actually, it's a letter to a clinical practice journal. Actually, what they did here was they said, what'd they do here? Tracheotomy, let me make a hole in the throat, is frequently indicated for patients with COVID-19 suffering from SARS. The French Army Biomedical Research Center provided our hospital with military masks equipped with P3 filter cartridges. So, they're testing out these P3 cartridges on COVID patients? Nope. They don't even mention COVID patients even once here. They do say efficacy of these masks for SARS-CoV-2 protection has not been explored. However, they did try these masks out, and they said, despite the use of an unaccustomed procedure, we performed 20 tracheotomies without any complications. So they're actually testing, can you operate, you got this big thing on your face, and can you still perform a tracheotomy? They did that, but they weren't doing them on COVID patients. So that's a little weird. Here is, they had some nice helpful images along with this. And I guess you would want to see if you could actually use that device while you're performing surgery, or tracheotomies in this case. By the way, I didn't cherry pick. That's the whole research paper that they're citing here. That's the whole thing. There it is. It fits on a single page. And what is it? It doesn't mention any flights. It doesn't mention whether or not the patients even had COVID. They didn't test for that. There's no mention of the number 11 anywhere. No mention of any positive cases whatsoever. So how did they put their review together and come to the conclusion of a 0 out of 20 with 11 subjects on a charter flight? They don't even mention a flight in here. I don't even know what's happening at this point in time. But the conclusion, low risk for transmission when wearing masks. So they got the conclusion. This is just bizarre. I've never seen anything quite this bizarre and low fidelity in my. This is going to be a fun one to review. Stick with me. I'm going somewhere with this. Okay, this is really actually important to your life and mine. Trust me, I'll connect some dots. So then here's the biggest study that they've got. This one here, Celebi. This is in Turkey. So 47. Remember, they only had 243 cases of COVID that were caught by people who weren't wearing masks. 47 of them came from this one study. So this is a big one. And here they said risk factors included inappropriate use of personal protection equipment, PPE, while caring for COVID-19 patients and staying in a break room without a mask for 15 minutes. So this is big. This is important. Big study here says if you weren't wearing a mask or you didn't use your PPE, which is a mask is part of, then you got COVID. Very, very powerful study. So I'm like, well, in here, before I get into that one, they had this other one, Gao from 2020, again, China. And the conclusion was not wearing an N95 respirator and severe fatigue were risk factors. So the question becomes, well, how many risk factors are we talking about in this particular case? So I'm going to tear into that Celebi study, but very quickly before I go there, I just want to tell you, if you need to find out where I am, you can follow me here, take a screenshot of this. We'll post these down in the description below, but lots of different ways to begin following me. And the reason I'm telling you that is because of this little adventure right here, which I'll let you read about, but we did get the STRIKE out of this YouTube channel. So that's a very serious thing. It means, 3 strikes, you're out, the whole channel goes away. So I got to be very careful about what I can and can't say. If you want to know what I actually really think about things where I can't say, like Dwizabin, which is the drug which shall not be named, or other things that what I really think, obviously you can't follow me here. So there's also a part 2 or part B. It's another segment of this particular video that's going to come out a little later this week on this channel here on YouTube, but you can find everything always over there at Peak Prosperity. So you can, whenever you want to see all of my stuff, there it is. And by the way, this is our most popular membership for people who do like to become members, is the Insider right here. And glad to say more and more people are joining up because they appreciate and enjoy this kind of information that I deliver. This is, I think, a very instructive reader testimonial. I'll let Beverly tell it to us here. And she says, "Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for explaining these complicated issues in such an easy way to understand. You have a real talent for it. Whether it's a COVID research paper, a vaccine trial, oil reserves, or just money markets, you always present the info in simple language with a full explanation. I can't tell you how valuable this has been to me over the past 2.5 years. I am better prepared, more knowledgeable, less anxious, more resilient than ever before, in large part because of the knowledge I've gained from you." You're welcome, Beverly. That's what I do. I'm here to help simplify this world and make it as easy as possible so that people can take action like Beverly, like you. Taking action is what really matters. So back to the story. Remember I said we're going to take a closer look at this study here. So this one here that had 47 out of 243. What are these other risk factors? So we look at this, and first thing we find out is, well, how did they identify if somebody even had SARS-CoV-2 out of those, the 40 some people who ended up with SARS-CoV-2? It's because they took upper respiratory samples, and if you had a cycle threshold value of 37 or less than 38, that was defined as a positive test result. You and I both know maybe that might have made sense back there in August of 2020, but today nobody would ever consider a cycle threshold of 37 to be indicative of an active infection. And it's probably very high chance of it being a false positive or a meaningless positive up at that point. So that was part 1, but part 2 is, I don't think it's a bad study that they did here, but how many risk factors? So look what they did here in trying to determine, here are all the cases. They found 47 cases of people who did come down with a cycle threshold of 37 or less against a bunch of people who didn't. Their controls of 134. But it wasn't just, they weren't looking just at masks. They were sifting through every possible variable they could think of. So here we see out of these 47, 7 people were medical doctors, 28 were nurses, 12 were cleaning personnel. 16 of that whole total cohort had some sort of an underlying disorder. 10 of them had the presence of a healthcare worker in their own household. 3 of them had presence of SARS-CoV-2 positive person in the household. 25 of them, presence of SARS-CoV-2 positive person within the occupational or social surroundings, or let's keep going. These were all the risk factors they looked at. Did you examine or touch a suspected or confirmed case in the patient? There's a yes. Obtaining a respiratory sample. Did you do that? Kind of a risky procedure. Yes. Intubating a subject. Very risky procedure. Did you do that? How about this? These. So anyway, there's 14 separate risk factors in here, of which wearing a mask was one. So in this all critical study here, which had basically, this is 1/5 of all the reported cases in this study, where they sifted through, found 13 studies. I don't know why one was those people performing tracheotomies and gas masks that didn't even mention COVID. Weird that you had 1,700 studies to pick from and you chose that one. Weird. Anyway, this was 1/5 of nearly all reported cases. And they say, well, risk factors included inappropriate use of PPE. It's true. They also included lots and lots of other things, including, let's see, making a mistake while implementing infection control precautions, or staying in that break room, or entering ICU room, or resuscitating a patient. Anyway, there were 14 risk factors. No possible way to determine which of these was more important than the others. This is just a kind of study that says, here's some things we think might be important. If a signal sort of loosely pops out, you'd want to look at that more completely. Anyway, that's not what they did in this study. They just slapped it right in there and said, yeah, 1/5 of the reported cases we're going to report on came from this one study. All right. I'll tell you what, I too am absolutely howling that anyone could share this preprint on mask wearing. This is what Alistair Monroe said today. He said, I pray they simply didn't bother reading it before promoting it, as that's genuinely the least worrying explanation. A new low for COVID Twitter. Yes, it is. So, okay, we're all done here. There's not much more I can tell you about this particular study. By the way, this is what we're going to look at in the second segment here today. And there's a real bombshell. There's some massive, massive fraud that's come along. And then finally, in part 2 of this whole thing, we are going to talk about what happens when your main narratives all break down and you have this self-delusion. Science is in the midst of a crisis of self-delusion. We have institutional crises, and we've got crises in our monetary policy, within our energy policies, all kinds of ways. And they're all fractal reflections, larger or smaller, of the same thing we're talking about here, with how people delude themselves, cherry pick, and torture basic information to tell the story they want it to tell. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.